Virtual reality gaming is a hard thing to sell. Not only because for a lot of people the entry cost of a headset is prohibitively high, but also because the simple act of playing a game is a much bigger decision than it is for gaming on a TV or a monitor. You can play a traditional game on your couch or at your desk with food cooking in the oven, watching the kids, or chatting with your spouse, but VR basically involves going into a totally different dimension where all you can really hear or see is the game world. This degree of necessary commitment has led many people to think that virtual reality is simply a gimmick which a few nerds will dabble in before it loses any and all support and then eventually just goes away. As one of the nerds who has been dabbling in VR for years now, starting with the PlayStation VR before moving up to an HTC Vive and now onto a Valve Index, I can safely say that while virtual reality is certainly a niche, it's an extremely impressive one, which is difficult to explain. It's sort of like the Matrix.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
And Half-Life Alyx is probably the best example of a game which really does have to be played in order to truly grasp how incredible it is. The footage you're seeing was captured with a Valve Index, but you're only seeing my left eye or my right eye depending on which playthrough the footage was pulled from, and obviously the image is in 2D. Saying as I'm right eye dominant, you aren't seeing me aim down the sights of the weapon in the footage with the HUD at the bottom of the screen, unless I try to trick it and pretend to aim with my left eye, and you definitely aren't grasping how incredible the 3D visuals are in any of the footage you'll see here. Not only that, the frame rate you're seeing is about 1/3 of what I was experiencing in-game, and as a result, this footage might look shaky and disorienting. So if it's causing you issues, I recommend listening to this review like a podcast rather than watching it. And even if you are watching the review at max resolution, believe me when I say that this footage really isn't doing the game justice for objective, measurable reasons. It's not the same as saying you can't understand The Last of Us Part 2 story if you just watched it all on YouTube. You need to play it in order to understand why Abby is such a good person. Because apparently scenes like this will somehow become more sympathetic if you wander around fighting zombies and cultists as her for 10 hours.
She's pregnant. Good.
Playing Half-Life Alyx firsthand in VR doesn't change the story at all, and honestly, other than the ending, which we'll discuss at the end of the video, the story in the game is at most serviceable. It's not bad, but it's also not the reason why you want to play this game. But you could watch a full playthrough of this game 1,000 times over after having watched another 1,000 different video reviews, and still not have a real concept of the experience this game provides. It's why it's taken me almost a year to make this video. I had to eventually come to terms with the fact that nothing which I say or show can truly do this game justice, but I've decided to man up and give it a shot. Now that the preamble is out of the way, let's dig into what Half-Life Alyx is and what makes it so spectacular. Half-Life Alyx is both a prequel to Half-Life 2 and something of a sequel to Half-Life 2 Episode 2, and that's all I'll say without a spoiler warning, but that warning will happen toward the end of the video. You're safe for now though. You play as Alyx Vance, who is the charismatic sidekick character in Half-Life 2 and its 2 expansions. You don't get to see any of Alyx's awesome facial animations in this game though, as 99.9% of Half-Life Alyx takes place through her eyes, which makes sense considering that is the Half-Life way, and this is a VR game, so yeah. The premise is pretty simple. Eli Vance is captured by the Combine and Alyx sets off to rescue him. To assist Alyx is the hilarious Russell, played by Kiwi comedian Rhys Darby, who not only adds some fun, quirky humor to the proceedings.
Alyx, up here! You're gonna need a gun! Don't worry, it's unloaded. It's unloaded now!
But also supplies Alyx with the gravity gloves, which are the main hook of the gameplay. Anyone who has played Half-Life 2 probably has very fond memories of the gravity gun and how it opened up the gameplay of that game. Half-Life 2's physics model made the act of grabbing saw blades and throwing them at headcrab zombies feel incredible, not to mention the simple quality of life boost that came with being able to grab items from afar. And the gravity gloves in Half-Life Alyx take this concept and amp it up to 11. Maybe even 12 or 13. Maybe even 14. You use a beam which comes out of the back of your hand and you can grab nearly anything of reasonable weight in the environment with it. But unlike the gravity gun, which would automatically pull objects toward you, the gloves require that you grab hold of the object and then pull it in the direction you want it to move. In most cases, this will be toward you, but you still have to catch the object when it reaches you. It's tricky at first, but the system is pretty forgiving, so you'll be a pro at it within minutes. At first you'll be doing things like grabbing a pistol magazine, pulling it towards yourself and stowing it in your inventory, but eventually you may find yourself catching Combine grenades out of the air, then chucking them back at the alien bastards. Using the Valve Index controllers, the act of picking anything up in the environment with your hands feels pretty solid, and the gravity gloves take that to a whole other level. The more affordable Oculus sets and the very affordable Windows Mixed Reality sets have comparable controllers, and while testing all of them for this review is a task which is far out of my price range, I can deduce that the HTC Vive controllers would be the only ones which would not provide a good control experience. While the tracking on the Vive controllers is really great, the touchpads which are in place of the analog sticks on the other controllers are not good. So if you do have a Vive and are interested in Alyx, I'd recommend buying the Index controllers, which are compatible with the Vive, and currently they also include a copy of Half-Life Alyx. While Valve smartly did not make the game exclusive to their own headset, there are not currently announced plans to bring the game to PlayStation VR, but if they did, Sony would probably have to launch new controllers specifically for it, because the Move controllers would not be up to the task Half-Life Alyx demands of the player. As of this writing, there isn't solid information on how PlayStation VR will evolve for the PlayStation 5, but Sony, if you're listening, analog sticks. Give your players sticks to move with. Speaking of moving, locomotion is tricky in VR even if you do have analog sticks, as the disconnection between your brain's equilibrium and your eyes experiencing movement in a 3D space can lead to compromised balance, dizziness, or even nausea. To combat this, Half-Life Alyx has a variety of movement styles. The first and most intense are the continuous modes, which give you full freedom of movement using the left analog stick, the way you would experience in any traditional first-person shooter. You can decide to have either your head or your hand position guide your movement, but functionally they're pretty much the same. This is absolutely the most immersive way to play, but it's also the most likely to make you lose your balance. My suggestion would be to use a stool or something else to rest or lean your body into in order to give your inner ear an anchor point. Essentially, you need a little piece of reality that you can touch every now and then. This will help your brain get accustomed to this movement style, and before long you'll be able to do it while freestanding. I used this method for my first playthrough and it really helped me develop my VR sea legs, but on replaying the game for this review, I was standing from beginning to end using the continuous motion mode with no need at all for a real-world support structure. The next method is probably the best bet to balance immersion with comfort, as you can teleport to a point that you select with the analog stick, but then it will also animate your travel in a smooth zoom-like effect. Personally, I found this option to be nearly indistinguishable from the snap teleporting option from a physical comfort standpoint, so if the free motion is too much for you, this is the one I'd recommend. And the last one, full snap teleporting, just instantly puts you where you target your teleport, which might look disorienting in captured footage, but perspective snapping in VR is actually pretty comfortable. If you do have the stomach for the continuous motion modes, it's worth noting that you can also just move via the animated teleport whenever you want by holding back on the right analog stick. So if you do find yourself needing to jump down from a height or walk down stairs, which are actions that are more of a challenge to your equilibrium than just walking on a level surface, you can warp there and continue smooth moving without having to jump in and out of the controls menu. Turning can also be handled similarly with either smooth turns or snaps, and personally I find 45-degree snaps to be most comfortable and effective. Lateral turning in VR with analog sticks can be really rough even if you're seated and playing a game with a controller, and that's a lesson I learned 10 seconds into trying to play Resident Evil 7 with smooth turning on. Never again, brain no leg. When you do find a control scheme which works for you, you'll find that where the interface really shines is in the more specific movements and tasks, which most other first-person shooters just map to a single button. Things like opening gates, climbing up ladders, or picking up and breaking boxes of ammo are done by just doing those things the way you would in real life. Exactly how precise this feels might depend on your hardware, but I can say for sure that using a properly calibrated Valve Index, these actions feel pretty close to perfect, with the exception being the quick skip that happens at the top of ladders. Also, Valve smartly implements a system in which actions which may not be comfortable for the user, such as climbing down a ladder, can be skipped by just holding forward on the left analog stick. You can also hold the right analog stick forward in conjunction with the left to enable mantling if you want to jump over obstacles. However, the vast majority of actions you can perform with your hands in real life, you are able to perform in Half-Life Alyx. When you start experiencing these actions is when you'll begin to see not only how well designed this game is, but also how impressive virtual reality can truly be if the medium is used correctly. Having the actions you perform in VR feeling correct is a huge part of a VR game. But would it really matter if the game you're actually making your way through isn't compelling? Thankfully, Valve didn't just crap out an impressive VR tech demo with zero substance to it. Half-Life Alyx is also a damn solid game. It's tough to say it would still be a great game if it weren't in VR, as porting this game to a traditional display would effectively involve redesigning so much of it that it may end up being unrecognizable as the same product, But assuming we live in a dimension where that is possible, Half-Life Alyx is still a very solid blend of puzzle solving, first-person shooter action, survival horror, and narrative fiction. We'll ease in with the puzzles, which primarily revolve around Alyx's sonic screwdriver. It's actually called the EMP tool, but it's the closest thing I've ever seen to the iconic Doctor Who device in the game. 10th Doctor is best Doctor. Alyx's tool is used in many of the game's puzzles and not only acts as the key to begin many of them, but also the interface which lets you interact with the puzzle's elements. Many of these puzzles are displayed as holographic Combine technology, which give you a 3D image which can be manipulated with the tool, your hands, and by simply moving around the image in physical space. Some involve moving one beam of white light to another while avoiding a series of red beams, others involve matching colored nodes by memory, and others involve moving one or more vectors which emit a beam to have the beam connect to all the other vectors displayed. This might not sound incredibly engaging, and they honestly probably wouldn't be if you were doing it with a controller or a touchscreen, but manipulating these 3D images in VR is incredibly satisfying. Diffusing mines feels notably awesome as you guide an orb of light through rings while being chased by a fuse. The other most common type of puzzle is less fun and involves using the tool's ability to view and manipulate wiring to connect power sources through walls. I wouldn't call these puzzles bad, but they are very frequent and usually aren't any more difficult than follow the blue line until you get to a thing you could spin, and then spin it until you can continue the blue line. Although some of these puzzles, like the one in the zoo, become much more intense and involve a bit more brain power, they're just never as concise or satisfying as the beam manipulation puzzles you'll find on the doors, ammo lockers, fabricators, and mines. Ultimately, the puzzles being as frequent as they are serve the very important function of pacing the game in a way which isn't totally exhausting, as during combat you'll find yourself doing a fair amount of quick, sudden movements. Shooting is something you will certainly be doing a lot of too. There are only 3 weapons in the game, a pistol, a shotgun, and a submachine gun, but they are all upgradable and all of them feel fantastic to use. How effective they are depends largely on how well you can aim and fire, being a VR game, but the upgrades certainly add a lot to their usability, which makes tracking down the numerous upgrade resins hidden around each level very rewarding. The amount of resin to be found makes the exploration quite satisfying too, as while they aren't absolutely everywhere, there are enough of them that going off the beaten path usually results in a few pucks to collect. And when you do have enough resin for an upgrade, in addition to functional increases, the upgrades also dramatically alter the appearance and animation of the weapons. For example, there's an ammo reserve for the pistol which has a very unique design. It essentially lets you load 2 magazines by taking all the rounds out of the first and placing them into a feeder rail system, leaving your mag well free for an additional one. It not only looks really cool, but can change the pace at which you reload your weapon, as so long as the mag in the gun is dry, you aren't wasting any rounds by ejecting it and loading another one. You can also get a holographic sight which will make landing headshots, killing head crabs, and destroying enemy breathing tanks or antlion legs a lot easier, as all of these things will glow orange in the sights. The shotgun is incredibly powerful and the best weapon in the game for taking down heavy Combine troops, armored head crab zombies, or even poison head crabs, but the ammo for this weapon is sadly quite scarce. It's a top break design with an internal magazine, so the shells have to be loaded individually, but it can hold up to 7 shells. There's a charging handle on the side which you can use to cock it, but it's semi-automatic, so you only need to do so if you totally empty the magazine. Eventually you can upgrade the shotgun with an autoloader which lets you slap shells onto the side of the weapon. You can then hit the mag eject button which will break open the action and automatically load the shells you have in the side reserve. However, you'll have to flick the controller to bring the action back down before you can fire, in addition to cocking the gun if you're loading it from empty. The other shotgun upgrades are a cool, wide, circular laser sight, a fairly useless double shot, and a grenade launcher which I was 1 resin puck shy of getting at the end of the game. The final gun is the submachine gun, and this is probably my favorite weapon in the game. It doesn't quite have the precision of the pistol, but if you unlock both the holographic sight and the laser sights, it's pretty close. But the rate of fire also makes it really decent at taking down powerful enemies. The extended mag is also pretty cool, as it lets you load 4 total energy cells which automatically load as the previous ones expended. There is a slight gap of time where you can't fire though, so it works very differently from the reserve mag in the pistol, and you cannot eject your currently loaded cell even if there are only a few rounds left. All 3 of the weapons feel very unique, and Valve made the smart decision to adapt all of them to a single hand design. Anytime you want, you can get a little bit of extra stability by holding the pistol grip with an additional hand, which is much less awkward than holding the barrel and pretending your arm isn't floating around holding nothing. This mechanic is what made Respawn's Medal of Honor Above and Beyond borderline unplayable for me and resulted in me refunding it on Steam. 2-handed long guns in virtual reality all but require a stability peripheral like the PlayStation Aim, if you ask me. And there it is, the one solitary way that the PSVR is better than the other VR headsets. It blows my mind that there's not more gun peripherals like the aim. Other than the 3 guns, you also have access to grenades, which work very well for clearing crowds of enemies or doing heavy damage to armored enemies. In addition to the weapons themselves, it wouldn't be City 17 if there weren't red barrels to detonate, and you can find them in convenient, handheld gas can sizes here as well. This portable model is super handy because Alyx can hold these cans in one arm, which then allows her to throw them toward a group of enemies and shoot them, which is an incredibly satisfying move, particularly when you're able to one-shot the barrel in midair. Techniques like this are incredibly useful for conserving ammo, which in the early game is incredibly necessary. If Half-Life Alyx has one thing about it which is fundamentally very different from the other games in the franchise, it's that the pace of its action is much more slow and intimate, similar to a survival horror game. Your shots really count, particularly early on, as you won't be easily finding tons of ammo for your weapons, and when your mag is empty, reloading isn't as simple as tapping X, square, R, or if you're truly based, mouse button 4. For example, to reload the pistol, you have to eject the mag with one of the buttons on your right-hand controller, reach over your shoulder, grab a fresh mag, load it, and rack the slide before you can fire again. Or if you're really precise with your ammo count, you can leave one round in the chamber, reload the mag, and avoid having to cock the action a second time. Either way, it's a cool task to perform, but it's not one you want to be doing with a poison head crab flying at you, so instead of firing 10 rounds at the thing and hoping for the best, one well-placed shot at a well-positioned gas can is much more preferable. Healing Alyx is also quite satisfying regardless of which method you use. The most definitive would be the aid stations, which have always been a staple of the series, though now they have animated antlion grubs who get squeezed of their healing juices while administering dozens of subdermal injections into Alyx's hand. The other method is using one of the healing auto-injectors, which can be carried in your wrist pockets and used anywhere. To use one of the auto-injectors, you press a button on your controller which extends the needle, and then you slam the controller into your real leg, which then triggers a satisfying haptic vibration in the controller. The result is probably the most immersive healing system in any game I've ever played. It's seriously impressive stuff. Speaking of immersion, sound factors heavily into what makes this game so incredible as well. 3D sound is nothing new for a VR game, but it's utilized masterfully in Half-Life Alyx, with the screeches of headcrabs and combine radio chatter giving you a good idea of where your enemies are. All the classic Half-Life 2 sounds are there too, notably the ultra-satisfying ECG flatline sound that lets you know that you did in fact kill that combine trooper. The visuals are a whole other thing, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this review, this footage is not doing the game justice. The Source 2 engine looks spectacular, City 17 looks exactly the way you remember it, but better, and the epic roller coaster ride moments, like the train crash towards the beginning of the game, really need to be seen to be believed. Call of Duty may be the series which has the market cornered on impressive blockbuster movie moments, but seeing moments like that in full 3D with the illusion of realistic scale is kind of unbelievable. While I don't normally do full spoiler sections, because Half-Life Alyx's barrier for entry is so high, and I'm certain there are Half-Life fans who may not have the means to play this game anytime soon, be it for financial or even practical physical reasons, as VR does require at least a moderate amount of free space. Also, with the present state of the world, I seriously doubt there's a whole lot of public virtual reality arcades open for business and running as normal these days. So we're going to talk about the phenomenal ending of this game, including showing the ending cutscene which sets up future games in the franchise. If you ever plan on playing Half-Life Alyx, be it at a friend's house, at VR arcades when they open back up, or after a long, hard summer of mowing lawns and saving money, to set yourself up with a decent PC and a Windows MR, Oculus, Vive, or Index headset, stop watching right now. But don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, all the YouTube things. Because it's spoiler time, baby. The second Half-Life 2 DLC, titled Episode 2, ends on a massive cliffhanger which was never resolved. We never ended up getting Half-Life 2 Episode 3, nor have we yet to get a full-on Half-Life 3. So last we saw our heroes, Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance, were watching in horror as Eli Vance was being killed by a combine creature which sort of looked like the brain bug from Starship Troopers, if it could fly. This event is referenced in Chapter 2 of Half-Life Alyx when the Vortigaunt who helps Alyx get into the sewer tunnels explains that her father is dead.
You will not save him. He is dead.
What?
Or he will be.
Is or will be?
It is a matter of perspective.
Vortigaunts have powers which can affect time and space, and it's through such timey-wimey intervention that Gordon and Alyx are saved from the explosion at the end of Half-Life 2. Gary the Vortigaunt is perceiving an event which is yet to happen, as there are events in the mind of a Vortigaunt and in Half-Life Alyx which don't obey the rules of linear time. It's not only a nod to the ending of Episode 2, but a bit of foreshadowing to the ending of this game. Most of the campaign in Half-Life Alyx involves Alyx trying to take down a floating Combine base in order to acquire a weapon that they have on board. It's eventually discovered that the base isn't an armory but a prison, and the Combine are trying to keep the weapon in. Alyx and Eli then decide to continue pursuing it, as the weapon in question is obviously something the Combine fear. It's then revealed that the weapon escaped from Black Mesa, leading the Vances, as well as the player, to assume that it's series hero Gordon Freeman. When Alyx makes her way to the end, she discovers that she did in fact rescue a being who escaped Black Mesa, but the being is not Gordon, and probably not even human. It's the series' most creepy and enigmatic character, the G-Man. The G-Man then explains to Alyx that he's impressed by her abilities and that he and his employers may have underestimated her usefulness. He also states that his previous employee, Gordon Freeman, has been unable or unwilling to do what the employers wish. He then offers Alyx the option to nudge an event in a small way, using the G-Man's considerable ability to alter space and time. First, she pleads to have him remove the Combine from Earth entirely, but the G-Man says that that's too much of a nudge, at which point he transports her to the future, to the moment of her father's death, and gives her the opportunity to change it. Alyx agrees, but in exchange for this favor, she is taken by the G-Man and then listed as employed for a true deal with the devil moment. It seems as if the stage is set for Alyx to become the main character in Half-Life 3, considering Gordon was the G-Man's agent in the previous games, but then the post-credits scene happens.
Warning. Vital signs critical. Seek medical attention.
Gordon! Gordon! Wake up, Gordon. She's gone, Gordon. She's gone. Son of a bitch, it has unforeseen consequences. I knew it. When I get my hands on him, I'm gonna kill him. Figure this out. Right now. We got work to do.
While Valve hasn't exactly announced Half-Life 3, senior designer Phil Cole told GameIndustry.biz, "The ice has been broken, now we're hoping to smash through the ice completely," in reference to Half-Life Alyx leading to further Half-Life projects. Whether these projects will be VR, traditional first-person shooters, or something else entirely are things we can only speculate on, but using my own hand to grab that crowbar made me ready for whatever the Combine has to throw at me.